For the longest time, I secretly wanted more. I often found myself shrinking to fit in, settling for what was comfortable, and even selling myself short. Once I finally accepted that we deserve success and we are blessed with the power to achieve it, I stopped playing small. I'm serious about building a life I love, and you should be too. I'm Denise Taylor of DeniseTaylor.live, and welcome to Life, Love, and the Pursuit of Happiness. I help women prioritize themselves, their success, and their happiness. Let's meet this week's achiever whose story will inspire you to push past your fears and soar. Well, welcome back. I'm Denise Taylor. I feel like every time I go to open up one of these podcasts with you, I always say I'm excited. And that's because it's the truth. I am so excited, and I am in fact blessed to be here, able to share with you, to impact your life, and to help you begin to take the steps to build a life that you love without apology. One of the things that I know to be true is if we can embrace what I refer to as the success superpowers, our lives can indeed change. While each of our goals may be different, we can embrace these and really make a supernatural change in our lives. So there are 5, and I just want to take a chance to remind you of them now, because today's achiever is so impactful that he embodies and brings all of them to life. So I want you to listen for them, because I think you will see each and every one of these superpowers ignited. So as a reminder, superpower number 1 is see yourself successful. You have to see a successful version of you, because what you see, what you think is who you become. Number 2 is shake off fear. And I know that fear can be real. In fact, it can be paralyzing at times, but we have to be courageous enough to shake it off. And I always like to use the acronym false evidence appearing real. And you have to shake off every temptation to doubt yourself, to confuse your abilities, and to also discredit your worthiness. Shake off fear. Number 3 is do the work. We cannot slight ourselves when it comes to the necessity for us to get in there and do the work. God blesses the work of our hands, which means we got to put our hands to work. He is looking for you to take every gift, talent, and ability that he has blessed you with and activate it and get it into motion. Number 4, superpower number 4 is take care of you. You have to look for opportunities to take care of yourself from the very top of your head to the sole of your feet. Every aspect of you is important and vital to your success. So being able to take care of you as a priority is extremely important. And finally, number 5 is hold fast to your faith. Now, I don't want to delay introducing today's guest. He is by far one of my favorite people. He is my campus pastor, and he is going to bring to life and show you an example of each and every one of the superpowers. When I think of Chet Pete, I think of a guy who has so much promise, potential, but at the same time has really risen to become a great man of God. We shared a time talking about so many different things that I cannot categorize it as being focused on one thing. So I just went all the way in and took advantage of the opportunity to tap into the anointing on his life. So take a listen. I think you'll be blessed, and I think you'll hear those superpowers. Well, welcome to this beautiful episode of Life, Love, and the Pursuit of Happiness. And today, as I was considering which aspect we were going to anchor in on, I said everything, because when you have someone like Pastor Chet to join you, you want to tap into all of his wisdom. So we're going to talk a little bit about life. We're going to talk a little bit about love, and we're going to talk a little bit about happiness. So as I prepared for this time, I just couldn't narrow it down because you're a big guy in God
Oh,
and you
so
represent him so well. Thank you so much for joining us. You are a campus pastor with the best church, Elevation Church, at the best campus, University City. And
you
yes, I'm
see,
biased because that is my church home and my church campus.
absolutely.
And so I really feel honored and privileged to have you join me. And thank you so much for taking time to be with me on this episode. Now, I know you, I love you, I get to experience you, but why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners and our viewers and tell them a little bit more about you and your beautiful family?
Absolutely. Well, first I'll say I'm gonna have to like cut that first portion of this introduction. And anytime I'm feeling like I'm struggling and I need to get it together, I'm gonna play that back, and that's going to encourage me and give me the strength to keep going. What an introduction! Too kind. That was a bit much. That was a bit much. I don't need all
All
of that.
well
I don't need all of
deserved. You deserve
that.
every word I said.
Oh Lord. But yeah, my name's Chet Pete. I'm a community pastor at Elevation Church. Our campus, as you said, Elevation University City, in the heart of the University City area of Charlotte, North Carolina. Yeah, I'm a pastor, but I'm a husband first. Me and my wife, Whitney, we just celebrated 13 years of marriage in January. I know you're like, hey, did y'all get married when you were 12? And no, we did get married young. We were 21 years old when we got married. And we have identical twin boys. They are 9. They'll turn 10 in July. And they just they just hit this growth spurt, and they're changing. I had to go buy them deodorant. It's an interesting time. It's an interesting time in our house, but yeah, married 13 years, twin boys, and we get to pastor Elevation University City. It's an amazing season of life. We're having a lot of fun right now.
Awesome. So two things, when you turn 13, you like feel grown, even though you're not grown, but that's like 13 when you get that word teen
Yeah.
in your
Right.
age. So y'all crossed a huge milestone.
Absolutely.
Congratulations to you guys.
Thank
And
you.
the same true for the boys, because when you get to double digits, that's a huge milestone as
Absolutely.
well. So this
Absolutely.
is a big year for you guys, obviously, with the celebrations
Yeah.
that you
Yeah,
have.
for sure.
And I appreciate and love your beautiful family. So now I am always intrigued by the success of others, and serving others as the campus pastor is indeed remarkable. It's selfless in many ways,
Mm.
and I understand that, and it is impressive. And I know that's a blessing for you and your family. So tell us about your experience growing in ministry, and then ultimately, how did you get involved with Elevation?
Oh, yeah, I'll give a little bit of backstory. Yeah, I grew up in church. My dad's a pastor, and growing up as a preacher's kid, I felt like everybody was just like, "You're going to be a pastor. You're going to be a pastor." And honestly, I was like, "You're lying. You're lying. You're lying." I had, no desire to go into ministry. I gave my life to Christ when I was 16, and I loved God, loved the church, wanted to build a church. I just didn't see myself, being a pastor. It just wasn't something that, people were like, hey, like I was young and God told me. It wasn't like that for me. Probably because I had my mufflers on and I didn't want to hear it. Probably is what what the reality of it is. But I went into business. I went into retail management while I was in school, and started to manage stores. And I was actually training to be a district sales manager when I moved to Charlotte. And a friend of ours from Virginia actually said, "Hey, when you move to Charlotte, you got to check out Elevation Church." I never heard of it. This is in 2013.
Mhm.
So we moved to Charlotte. I moved to be able to, continue to further my career. And we went and visited some churches. It's like, oh, the church Elevation, let's go check it out. And honestly, when we came, it was mind blowing to me because I had never experienced ministry on this scale before, where I saw people making decisions to give their lives to Christ every single time that we came. seeing hundreds of people baptized. And I kind of was stunned. I just remember being taken back, like, this is really what revival looks like. This is really a move of God. And still, it wasn't a moment, even at that moment, where I was like, oh, like I need to be a pastor. Like it never still crossed my mind. I just felt like, we really wanted to give our lives to building the church. And so we got plugged in, started serving, started volunteering. My wife served in our kids ministry. I served in guest experience. And as a salesman in business, it was easy for me to get people connected. I was like, everybody that made eye contact, they were going to start serving. They were going to get connected to a group. You know what I mean? I was just relentless. And ultimately, it just was a snowball. It was like, my commitment to be able to build the church. Leadership at the time just was like, hey, would you start leading? Would you start doing this? Would you start doing this? And it snowballed into this thing where they were kind of almost grooming me without me knowing it, that they saw something in me that I hadn't yet seen in myself. To kind of fast forward, there was a moment where I was up for a promotion and I had an opportunity to move. And within the next month or so, they were going to tell me what city I was going to move to. For the first time, I actually felt sick because I didn't feel free to move. Like I felt this restlessness. Everything that I'd worked for was right in front of me. It was right in front of me for me to take this next step, start to make X amount of dollars a year. All of it was right in front of me. But yeah, I felt sick. I felt restless and I didn't know what it meant. And I love how, the Bible talks about how there's some things that you can't hear without a pastor. There's some things that you can't hear except for through a shepherd. And God used Pastor Stephen. He preached a sermon called "You Had to Be There." And he said that God has ulterior motives. And it's something I never forget. He says, sometimes you'll think God sends you to one place for one thing, but he sent you there for something completely different. I thought I moved to Charlotte to be able to build my career and make more money. He sent me here to get connected to this church so that I could see a picture of what he had really called me to all along. And he's preaching and he's talking about Elijah, how he took him to the brook when there was a famine in the land and fed them by the raven. And he just took them on this journey of like, he thought he was going here for this, but no, he had to get them to this family. And then he started to preach, you had to be there, you had to be there. And I felt like in my seat, I had to be here. Like, this is where you planted me. And I just remember that moment. I leaned over to my wife and I said, hey, I don't know what this means. All I know is that we can't move. That was all. I just know we can't move. And my wife was like, okay, cool. What's crazy is all along, my wife felt like she knew I was supposed to be pastoring. The whole time she said, I knew you were supposed to. You just wouldn't listen. You were being stubborn. You were being this. She was like, I knew. She's like, I knew the whole time. Within the next couple of weeks, I got a phone call. They were like, hey, can you come in? We'd love to talk to you about a position. And so we had the conversation and I knew then, okay, this is it. Like, this is it now. And I just kept saying yes. And so I came on staff and it's been 5.5 years now. I came on staff as a youth director. I became an associate campus pastor and then the campus pastor at UC for almost 3 years now. And this past year, I started to take on a little bit more responsibility, helping lead some of our campus pastors and lead some of our ministry teams across the church. And so it's been a whirlwind. It's been fun. It's been challenging. I've learned a lot. And I can just see that every step of the way that God knew what he was doing, even when I was confused and I was uncertain. God was steadfast and continued to be a light into our path, a lamp into our feet every step of the way. And so when I look back on it, it's like, oh, that's why that happened. That's why that conversation happened. Oh, that's where that came into play. And all things been really working together for us to be able to walk into this season boldly and God move in such a powerful way in our lives. And so that's kind of like the condensed version, you know what I mean, of the story to this point.
It's two things that I want to hone in on.
Yeah.
Because there's one I can completely relate to. The first is that baptism in that revival kind of experience.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of what happened to us. our youngest daughter, she was invited to attend an e-group, right? And so she's going to the e-group. I think it was on Monday nights, and then she comes home and she's like, Mom, I want to get baptized. And, that's when I, like, like what's going on? And so
who is these people? What they doing to my baby?
I'm like, okay, well, hold up. We go to church on Sunday morning. They have Saturday. So let me go to church with you to find out what's going. So we started this cadence of us going to Elevation on Saturday evenings. And, we were attending a different church on Sunday. So that's kind of how we started. So we roll into the time for baptism. And she got baptized at the Ballantyne campus in the lobby, right? So I'm at the campus and our last name is Taylor. They're in alphabetical order. So she's like number 30, right? In this long line of people to get baptized, right?
Wow, beautiful.
Like going up the stairs. And, in my mind, if we had 10, that was like a hot day.
Right, absolutely.
And so there's this.
And that's in a year. 10 in a year, like 10 within the full year. Like.
Exactly. Right. And that's no shade. That, baptism is powerful wherever it happens.
Absolutely.
But when you see that long line, and so we're standing there waiting to be baptized, and they start bouncing from campus to campus, baptizing on the screen, right? So they would baptize at this campus, and then they would shoot over to the next campus and baptize. So it was like this round robin that was happening, all 30 kids or all 30 people, right? And I'm sitting there like, I've never seen anything like this before, right? I'm just completely blown away by the entire experience. And we get through our long line of baptism candidates, and the rotation is still going at other campuses. And I'm just like, okay, I haven't witnessed. So I understand exactly what you mean when you talk about it felt like a revival, because I was in such shock when she got baptized. The second thing I love that you said, and you said it so freely, you said you kept saying yes. You said, I kept saying yes. I would imagine that there is a surrender that comes from a heart that says, I'm going to keep saying yes, one that trusts. Tell me about that, because you gloss right over it, but that was powerful in your transition from your retail career into your, career within ministry. That was obviously impactful in your growth within ministry.
Absolutely.
Talk about the heart that's behind I kept saying yes.
Wow. As you're talking, like I can only see the picture of how, we were made in the image of God. And so I always try to emulate, and that's the goal, is for us to try to emulate, who God is, who Christ is, and to have this kind of mirror. And so as you're talking, like the way that I see it is that when I think about who Christ is, when I think about who God is, he's a father. And I see him looking down at us, and his posture is yes. I see his posture as that, like he's predispositioned to say yes. I'm hurting, I need healing, and I think he's like yes. I need joy, I need peace, and he's like yes. I have an abundance of joy, and he's like yes. He's a father, and my boys look at me and they're like, Daddy, I want this, and my predisposition is to make my kids happy. It's to say yes, and so I wonder if you flip it. If I would mirror God the same way, if my predisposition to God is yes. Will you serve me? Yes, God, I'll serve you. Will you worship me? Yes, God, I'll serve you. And I think the more that we can practice that, I think there's just such an obedience. I mean, such a breakthrough on the other side of obedience. I think there's something beautiful that happens on the other side of that when we can look back to God and he's saying yes to us, and we're able to say yes back. I think that practice has been something that I've just tried to, over really when I think about the 13 years of our marriage, because it starts off so hard, because it's hard to say yes, because you got a lot of questions, right? It's like, you want me to do what? So what does that mean? Can you give me a list of directions? Can you give me all of the details? And the quicker I can get to a yes, I think the quicker I can get to what God has for me on the other side. And so trying to close that gap of the time where I need all of the answers, I think it's part of the growth and maturity in faith. And so that's constantly trying to figure that out and wrestle with that. And it's that picture of God that I think has enabled me to kind of wrestle to always have that be my inkling. It's like, you want me to do that? And you don't get it right all the time. We don't get it all right all the time. And sometimes it's not just this big thing. Sometimes it's very small things. It's like God will put somebody on your heart. Do you respond? Like, you know what I mean? Do you respond? Like, do you move? Like, and you never know what's on the other side of that. You never know. And there's been times, there's been times where you encourage me, like, where like it was just random and you don't know the insecurity that goes through my mind. Denise don't need to hear from me. And there's gonna be a moment, hey, I thought about you today, just wanted to let you, and you're like, you had no idea pop was going on. I needed that encouragement at that moment. And then I'm like, oh, but you only know on the other side of yes.
Yeah, that's good.
I never want to forfeit a blessing or a door opening in my life because I'm not willing to say yes.
That's good.
I never want to forfeit something that God wants to bring into my life because I'm not willing to say yes, because I need all the details. I need all the answers to every question. No. Step by step, I think God illuminates and he shows what it is, and you just walk it out and see what God does in the process.
That's awesome. I love that. You know, you talked about being campus pastor for 3 years, and I think you moved into that role shortly after we started attending you.
Yeah.
And so you're like the only campus pastor I really ever know. So you're the greatest campus pastor in my campus pastor, and always has been. I reflect back on a lot of great things, a lot of great moments. You know, I've seen you stand on the stage and make the call for people to give their lives to Christ, and I've seen those hands shoot up. I've seen you stand at the front and beckon people to come down for prayer, and I've seen people respond. I've seen you stand in the back in the dark as people enter in and greet them and recognize who they are, even though all the lights are out. So I see those spotlight moments, and I see those moments where the light's not as bright. And so I would imagine that you have some great memories, right? Even within the last 3 years, you have some great memories that you can tap into. The one I want to tell you that I think is the most impressive, and then you can say what you think your greatest one is when there was a lot of social unrest and societal unrest. And there was a huge tug on you to represent a voice for African Americans within the ministry. There was a huge responsibility put on your shoulder to really rise up and be confident, bold, and strong. I heard you tell your story, and it was a heartbreaking one for me to hear about picking up your sons and, you know, running into that stereotypical filing when you're just there to meet the bus. I've heard all of that.
Yeah.
But the ministry work that you were a part of that really was opening dialogue around how to have conversations with one another and tear down those predispositions, those hidden expectations, or even hidden agendas was powerful. And I think it was seeing you shine in that moment beyond the voice of God, right? This really tapped into your humanity in a way of being a Black man that I wanted to just celebrate you and honor you for what you did in that moment. Now, holding your own greatest memory to the side, let's talk about what that was like for you.
The first word that comes to mind, honestly, is exhausting. Like, to be totally honest with you, it was exhausting. It was probably one of the most exhausting seasons of being a pastor. And it was because it's like it was coming from so many sides. It was coming from a side of being, one of the few Black staff members, because we are a predominantly white ministry. But our ministry is very, very diverse. Our church, we were averaging in physical attendance before the pandemic, over 30,000 people coming in physical attendance. And of that 30,000, 35% of that across our church were Black people. So, I mean, so when you think about, a church, a very evangelic, large church with a white pastor, God's really broken some barriers through our church. And what we're seeing in God doing our church is really unparalleled. To have a campus like our location is about 80% Black. You know what I mean? It's like, when you think about this in the context of our full church, it's amazing. The mantle that I felt like God kind of placed on me in that season was to be able to, bring a humanity, bring a reality, bring flesh, something that people could actually feel. It could be tangible. It wasn't theory, to people all across our church, and even people that were just watching around the world. And I felt the weight of that. And so while feeling the weight of that, I still have my own feelings. I still have my own thoughts. I still have my boys that are 9 years old and are growing up. And they may experience some of those same things. And so personally, having to be able to prepare them, have conversations with them, while being able to stand in front of crowds, or speaking in any platform, and kind of share that story and walk through that was very, very exhausting. A lot of restless nights, and I'd have to pause and really, really thank my wife, in that season, because people will applaud me for because that's what they see. But she, in that season, I remember we were broadcasting late at night. And so I'd be online broadcasting our 10 p.m. worship experience, that sort of thing. And I didn't make the connection, but I remember during that season, this is right after George Floyd was murdered. I would leave Ballantyne and have to drive to our house about 30, 45 minutes. And it'd be like midnight. It'd be like 12:30. It'd be like midnight. I'd be driving home after broadcasting in the middle of that season. And so in that season, I'm driving home at midnight. My wife is terrified because of the image that she saw of a Black man being murdered on the screen. She's terrified, and she's like worried about me. And I'm at church. I'm broadcasting online all around the world doing these things, and she's at home, praying, restless, in the same thing. But then I get home, she still would support me, still would encourage me, still would, not let me really feel the weight and magnitude of even how she felt at times. And so, I'd have to be able to celebrate that for sure. I think we broke a lot of barriers, broke a lot of ground, and it's just the beginning of what God is continuing to do in our church. And I think we've gotten more mature, we've become more aware, and I think we're more positioned to do more ministry than ever because of it, because it transcended just the Black experience. I think it transcended that and really made us more aware of the level of empathy that we needed to be able to reach people, minister in communities. And our staff grew up. And I'm honored to have played a significant part in it, and to be able to have a seat within our church, to be able to do that. But when I look back on it, I want to take a nap. I want to take a nap. I remember, like, it was a lot of bags under my eyes, like, you know what I mean? I remember that season feeling like that. But looking back on it, I can look back and be like, oh wow, God got glory out of that. We didn't stir the pot and create a space where people just argue. No. We really were gracious. We really led with love, and we really created a space where people could have a revelation of what God wanted to do through it, and so something only He could do. And I'm really proud of our church, and I'm proud for the way that we stepped up in that. And I really have to, just celebrate my wife for her support in that season too.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Because like I said, I just wanted to honor you, because I know that there was that demand and that pressure on you. And so I appreciate you doing what you did. Now, did you have another memory that you considered the greatest for you so far as pastor?
it'd have to be, leading my boys to Christ and baptizing them. That'd have to be, number one moment. Because, I think as a pastor, sometimes we forget that this church that we lead, it's for us too. You know what I mean? Like, it's for us. And Pastor said this a long time ago. He talked about the dynamic of that you're a sheep and you're a shepherd at the same time. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And that dynamic of, hey, like, I have to lead the people, but yet I need to be led. Mm-hmm. I need to feed the people, but I need to be fed. And I think seeing God use our church, our kids, volunteers, and all of that to be in a position where they started to grow in their curiosity about God and start to ask these questions. And then it was Easter Sunday in 2017. 2017, that they, it was an Easter Sunday, and we presented the gospel to our kids. And I got to come back. They were calling me, Chet, come back. So I walked back to E-Kids, and they said, hey, Carson and Carter shared interest that they wanted to accept Jesus into their heart. And so I walked over to them. And as you said, each weekend, we don't have a weekend that we don't give people an opportunity to give their lives to Christ. Mm-hmm. And so I've done it, hundreds of times. Hundreds of times I've said that prayer and led people to have that opportunity. But that moment of being able to have them repeat after me and accept Jesus into their heart as my babies definitely is the proudest moment, the most, because at the end of the day, if I can minister to thousands of people, but my family isn't growing in their faith, what is this for? You know what I mean? God's word says it clearly, if you don't take care of home, you're worse than an infidel. And so I'm like, for me to be able to lead my family that way, for my boys to have curiosity about who God is and what God wants to do in their lives, and he's doing it through our church, for sure. I mean, by far, you know what I mean? There's a lot of other moments that I could say, hundreds of people being baptized, spontaneous baptisms. I could tell you some stories about some specific people. Some of those moments I could go into for sure, but that's the moment. Like, that's the moment that I always come back to.
Awesome. All right. So now you don't have to stay in the ministry vein. It's your choice. This is an open-ended question. What are you looking forward to the most this year, 2021? What are you looking forward to?
Let me see if something comes up personally. We've been in the ministry vein, so that's where my mind's going. Uh-huh. One thing I'll say about ministry in 2021 is that when I look back on 2020, our whole world was flipped upside down. What we thought church was completely shattered, and we had to regroup and figure out how we could still minister to people even though they weren't coming to the building. Mm-hmm. And so when I look at 2021, we have an opportunity to innovate like never before. The tendency always with leaders is to go back and revert back to what you've always done before. Mm-hmm. It's always easy just to go back to what you've done. It's always easy just to fall to the lowest common denominator because that's what you're used to. It's safe. It's like, it's familiar. It's cozy. Mm-hmm. I'm excited about the opportunity to innovate, to push the envelope on what it means for us to be the church, to feel the pressure of like, I won't do it the same way we've always done it. We have an opportunity to rebuild however it is that God breathes on in this moment. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And that's the thing that I'm really excited about. We're trying a lot of different things to figure out what that means in the digital spaces for local expression. Mm-hmm. A lot of things that we haven't invested in the past, we're investing in because it was like the pandemic pushed us to. And we're seeing God do some amazing things to it. So I'm just excited to see like the evolution of God's church in this season coming out of a pandemic. It's really, really exciting. It's scary because again, it's like, it's unknown, it's not familiar. And sometimes you don't know exactly if you're winning. Mm-hmm. But that really, really excites me to be able to see what that means. I can give you, a personal one. I think that I've been talking about my boys a lot, but they're hitting this stage at turning 10 that the conversations are going deeper. Mm-hmm. Their thought process is changing. And so the more that I'm able to spend time, with them and actually just really sit, listen, and figure out where to invest. That's exciting to me because I think it's going to be a different stage of relationship that I'm really looking forward to having with these guys. They have these glimpses of it that's like, oh, whoa, where this man, is this man in my house? Like, what is going on? You know what I mean? And then there's these moments where they're still sweet, like little babies, and you know, and that I'm really excited about that season. You know, of seeing what this means for them to be able to grow into who God's created them to be.
Yeah, you're gonna start to see the reasoning happen.
Yeah.
And it changes because you're so used to deciding for them.
Right.
So now, you know, you're going to start seeing the thought processes. And, you know, just in my experience, that's when you start honing it, right? You start honing it, and you're really helping to develop it. And I think, you know, just in my experience, where it goes wrong is when you don't allow it to develop and you still try to override with a decision instead of letting them show you what that reasoning is.
That's great.
You can give that course correction. So it is a fun
That's great.
So don't snuff it out. You'll be tempted.
That's great.
You'll be tempted to go straight to because I said so.
Absolutely.
But
and I've caught myself a couple times. It was like, oh, like that was a missed opportunity. That was a missed opportunity for sure. Absolutely.
And so it'll be good because you'll start to see, oh, they get it. You know, these things that I've exposed them to, this training, all these things that I've done to really groom them and get them ready, will start showing up, and it'll be impressive for you.
Okay.
All right. So I know your commitment to serving, especially in ministry, is a huge part of your life. What else do you enjoy when you can?
I love basketball. And so, you know, I've started playing 2 or 3 times a week this year. And, you know, really focusing on my health and that sort of thing. But really, I love basketball. So that's been really, really fun to get back into. My knees are mad at me because of it. You know what I mean? For sure. They let me know every time I walk up and down stairs. They're like, why did you do this to me? But I love basketball. I love watching basketball. I love that. I love movies. I really, really, really love movies. I can watch a movie every day. It's funny because Whitney will start watching movies. She'll go to sleep in 5 minutes into the movie. And then I'm like, yo, did you see that plot line? Did you see this? And she's like, she's gone. So I love movies. You know this. I love shoes. I really, really love shoes. You know, that's one of the things that I had to get control of over the last couple of years. But I love shoes. I love shoes. I love clothes. I love shopping. I don't do it as often as I would like to, but I like clothes. Like I like aesthetics. I like putting things together. That'd be something people wouldn't know.
That's cool. Okay, so that's what you enjoy doing. What makes you happy?
Wow. I think honestly, progress. Seeing something get completed, or seeing something move or take steps, it fuels me. It just really, really fuels me. And that could be anything. You know, even like I wash clothes. I wash the clothes in our house. All of them. There's 4 of us, 2 boys. I can wash 2 loads a day and still have more loads. Like, it's constantly washing clothes. But seeing those piles of clothes go down and be done, like it always does, I feel so accomplished and that sort of thing. So I can use that as a backdrop, you know what I mean, when you talk about service and being able to like help people. When you see someone take a step, it's nothing like that. I don't need to be patted on the back. I don't need to be celebrated. You don't have to do it. But to see someone in one season and going to the next and seeing that progression, really, 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 you know what I mean, will put a smile on my face and really fuel me. And so that, you know what I mean, that comes in even my relationships, like, you know what I mean, like seeing our relationship, me and my wife, seeing us progress, seeing us, learn more things about each other. Things staying stagnant, really, really frustrate me. And I'll get down if I'm not seeing something move. Like it just has to be that. And so that's why I think, spending time with my boys, spending time with my family, it really fuels me because I can see them going from one place to the next. I can see God moving. I think it's something that really, really, really gives me happiness for sure.
That's awesome. And weirdly, I can relate. I'm one of those people that just want to see progress as well. And so
Yeah,
I find those achievements in the simplest things,
yeah,
I just like to see it moving forward. Keep moving
absolutely.
forward. Okay, so
Absolutely.
now what prompted me to reach out to you and say, hey, I need to have a conversation is Rebecca Wilson. She shared that she was at a wedding and she's like, oh my gosh, Chet did the wedding and he just shared such great relationship wisdom as he performed the ceremony. Now, clearly I wasn't there, but she said
Right,
it
right,
with such enthusiasm that I was like, I need to talk to him about this relationship wisdom. So let's talk about relationships, marriage. What
yeah.
factors, a few factors you might have shared as key takeaways for the couple on that day? I can't even point you to when it was,
Um,
but she was definitely stoked.
yeah. Well, what's hard is like any wedding that I do, it's very, very specific and personal to that couple.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I take it like as a really, really, really big deal that someone would like allow me to officiate this moment of their lives. It's like it's a supernatural thing for two people to become one and to be trusted with it. I always want to make it really, really personal to them. And so I believe it was a couple that it's funny is they're foodies. They're foodies. They just love food. This couple just loves to like try new food.
Mm-hmm.
They're always talking about it. If you met them, you knew it. Like their nicknames like has to do with food. Like we call him Chef because he's always cooking stuff like that sort of thing. And so I knew that that was something that was like so personal to them. And I went on a journey of like, digging and trying to, figure out a way to get into that and let that big backdrop of what God was doing. And one of the things that I started to realize is that in relationships, a lot of times we mistake things. For example, as I think that you might be hateful, but really you're hungry.
Mm-hmm.
I might be like, you're so hateful. No, they're not hateful. They're just hungry.
Mm-hmm.
There's something that they're not getting. There's a deficit of something that, and that's the thing that like I started to kind of go on this path of kind of like digging towards. And so, that was one of the things that I think I just honed in on for them is to realize in a relationship, God has called you to feed each other selflessly.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of me putting the responsibility on my spouse to get XYZ right, my responsibility is me and for me to selflessly serve or feed my spouse. How do I feed her spirit? How do I feed her energy? How do I feed, you just take it down and I had, it got so big to me in my mind on what that meant in a life full of, and then you start to think of the romance side of like feeding, and my mind just started to go in all of these directions. And
Mm-hmm.
and so your mind can go like, take that how you want. Like, what ways are you not feeding your spouse? Because that's what he's called you to. That's what he's called you to. My responsibility is feeding my spouse, not trying to force her to do anything, not trying to make her do anything, but can continue to support, can feed encouragement, feed love, feed all of this. And the more that we do that, allow God to take care of the rest. And that was probably the backdrop of that wedding that I'll talk about. One other principle that I'll talk about from a different wedding, it was this couple, and maybe there's a couple watching that they were fiery, meaning they constantly fought like all the time. They loved each other, but they loved big, which means that they fought big. You know what I mean? If they were hurt, they were really hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that I had to like, because everybody that knows them knows that fire. Like, you know what I mean? Like knows that type of fire. And I thought that fire was a beautiful thing. It just had to be stewarded the right way. And so I started to pray about what that meant. And And I had this image in my mind of how when couples fight, they're facing each other, and they're facing each other, and they fight. And I realized in the message for them, it was called fighting position. And I was like, hey, you're fighting the wrong way. You're in the wrong position. If you guys stop fighting each other and you turn and start fighting the obstacles, the adversary, the things that come against you, what more could you accomplish? And so I took that couple, they were standing, I said, put your dukes up, and they were like right in each other's face. And I was like, put your dukes up, and everybody's dying laughing. And then I was like, that's how we live a lot of times in our marriages. We just like, just like da-da-da-da. And I said, now, and I took them and I turned them towards the crowd. I turned them and I said, what could you accomplish? Like, what could you do if that same fire was directed to you being side by side, fighting for the financial freedom that you want to have, fighting for the way that you want to raise your kids, the things that you want to accomplish, and to be able to fight for that. And so it was called fighting position. And it was a mental battle for them to be like, hey, I don't want you to stop fighting. I just want you to start fighting in the right position.
Oh, wow.
And so, again, I just try to make it as personal as possible to them, and always have a principle that, honestly, I'm preaching to myself. Like, to be totally honest with you, like, I'm preaching to myself. I actually, and I'll let you ask whatever other question, but I actually put this in my phone because my wife's love language is encouragement. And I actually have a reminder in my phone daily to encourage Whitney somehow. There's some days that I don't get that right. There's some days that I don't make it a priority. There's some days, but I'm like, like, I'm supposed to be feeding my wife encouragement. I'm supposed to be constantly doing that. And so honestly, that's something that, like, as I'm preaching it, I'm like, I need this too. And so, you know what I mean? That's been significant. And there's been seasons where, me and Whitney are both extroverts. We're both like that sort of thing. So it's like, there's been seasons where we've been like this. And I'm like, so I'm preaching to myself.
Yeah.
To myself,
and
sure.
those are generally the most impactful, right? Because you can feel it and you can share it from a place of intensity that makes that connection. I think both of those nuggets are huge, right? When you start talking about feeding one another, that's the intimacy of your relationship. A lot of people mistakenly think intimacy is the bedroom. No, that's the climax. You got to do some intimacy first before you get to the bedroom, which is the feeding part. And one of the things that I've discovered, especially when it comes to love in the biblical example, is all about sacrifice.
Right. Absolutely.
Like, love is never about me. Love is always about you.
Can you feed your spouse even when you're hungry?
That's really good.
Like, even when you're hungry, you know what I mean? And that's the picture, like you said, of Christ and his love for his church. He died for us, knowing that all of us would not return and have that relationship. He knew that anyway, and still gave his life, and continues to love us, and continues to pour into us, and continues to embrace us, even though we're not worshiping all the time, we're not praising him all the time, and sometimes we turn our back towards him. That's a beautiful picture of the relationship that God's called us to in marriage, is to constantly do it. Even when I'm hungry, can I still feed you? Can I still pour into you?
Yeah, that's good. And the other nugget, it's one of the things I remind myself too, is like, we're on the same team, right? So we don't want to do this. We definitely want to do that. We're on the same team. I say all the time, this is Team Taylor.
I love it.
Right? Because we can mistakenly look at hunger and see anger. We can mistakenly see it as selfishness. We can mistakenly see it as something that it's not, to your point. But when we allow ourselves not to be triggered by it, but to be understanding with it, we can then use it as an opportunity to feed, right? And we can use it as an opportunity to make the opposition truly the opposition, and not create that within ourselves. Those are great nuggets. So I see why she was so impressed. She came away really, really hyping you up. And I was like, I had this conversation. All right. So we're going to get ready to close out. But before I ask you my ending questions, I do want you to impart one thing in this season. You know, this season has been really hard for many. And so if you wanted to remind believers or encourage them with one thing, what would it be, especially knowing the hardship we face, the distance we faced, and everything that has happened over the last 365, you know,
Wow.
what would you want
Yeah.
to remind a believer in this moment?
Yeah. The thing that I think, and I'm gonna say it, it's gonna be cute. It's gonna be packaged.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way that I think you can remember things. And then I'll try to dig up underneath it a little bit. But the way that I see it is, and this is what sustains me, is understanding that God, He has power and authority.
Mm-hmm.
God has power and authority. And then it made me realize, what do I have? I have perspective and anointing.
Mm-hmm.
God has power and authority. I have perspective and I have anointing. I think so often in seasons like this, where our world's flipped upside down, we try to we try to make stuff happen. You know, we mess up a lot. We mess up relationships. We just tear stuff up because it's like we try to have power and authority. No. God has power. He's King of Kings. He's Lord of Lords. But the thing that I can control is my perspective. And that's our job. That's the work. How do I see it? Perspective. I own that. No, I own perspective. And anointing, that's the reminder that God's given me what I need to be able to accomplish what He's called me to. And if I don't have it, God, that's yours. You have power and authority. This journey has been the thing that, like, I think keeps me in a place of joy. I think keeps me in a place of getting above the water, having a zoomed out perspective, is because it's like, yes, this is bad. Yes, this hurts. But what is the perspective that I can find in this through God's word, through relationship, through godly counsel, that can give me the perspective to not give up, not throw in the towel? And then I can remember that God's anointed me for this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, He's given me what I need to be able to be the husband He's called me to be. I have the tools.
Mm-hmm.
He's anointed me for this. His Spirit is inside of me.
Mm-hmm.
This journey of asking myself, am I trying to have God's power? That's the question. Am I trying to like sit in His seat?
Mm-hmm.
We were not created to sit in that throne. We were not, it's not, we won't ever understand it all. We won't ever be able to change it all in our own strength. No. God has power and authority. But my job, I can figure out how to have the right perspective to be able to manage it and take care of me. Pastor said it this way here last year. He said the only thing that you can control is your focus.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only thing you control.
Mm-hmm.
I can sit and scroll on Instagram all day and focus on every bad thing that's happening, every ticker. I can sit and see what's going on with the virus and And I can focus on that. I can focus on that all day. And how will I leave?
Mm-hmm.
How will I leave?
Mm-hmm.
But if I sit and I focus in perspective, and I can see like how God sustained me, how He kept me, how He delivered me, what He's done in my past. I can see in the midst of this, I can trust that, oh, He's going to do something in it. And it's a fight. That's the fight. Is to be able to fight, to be able to stay in your seat.
Wow.
And so that would be something that, like, it's constant retooling and constant jerking myself back, because we weren't meant to carry that. It's just not our job.
Wow, that is so good. That's like a close, but I do have 3 questions.
It's okay.
All right. So here, I try to challenge everyone to live a life they love without apology. And so that includes life, love, and the pursuit of happiness. And so I want to tap into 3 pieces of wisdom and have you close us out with this. So tell me your life wisdom. It's what you would tell your younger self about life if you could.
Um, I I would say invest more into relationships in experiences versus any material or stuff that I deemed is so valuable. Um, I think that the investment into relationships, into experiencing things, are the things that matter the most. There's so many things that I feel like at the beginning of our marriage, we tried to accumulate and do that it's like is in the trash, and we thought it was the biggest or most important thing in the world. When that time, effort, and energy and resource and all of it could have been invested into us, into our relationship and the experiences that God wanted to bring us to. And so, some of the things that people are staring at, wanting to accomplish and trying to do, I'm all for, like, get after it, like, work hard, like, you know what I mean? Everything that God put in your heart, like, go after it. But not at the rate of sacrificing the people that God's entrusted to your span of care in your life. Because I can remember even when I was working before coming into ministry, the hours that I put in to be able to get after it. And I'm like, some of those moments, I missed some things that I probably I didn't have to miss. And those are the things that really matter and are fulfilling and are fueling and are life-giving, and the things that really matter. And so that would be that side of it for me, is focusing on the relationships that really matter, and the experiences. Those are the things that, like, I look back on, I remember, I hold on to, that mean the most, and prioritizing that above everything else.
All right. What about love? What's your love wisdom? What would you tell your younger self about love if you could?
I would say it's not about you. It's not about you. I was a jerk. Like, I was a jerk. Yeah, I think I was very if you're into the Enneagram, I'm an 8, and that's a challenger. And I think I've always, in that season, I think I thought so much highly of myself. I was entitled, and I expected so much. And so I feel like realizing that this life is not about me. It's not about always what I want, what I desire, what I pictured. That I think has given me the ability to be so filled and fueled when I'm in a healthy place of really loving and thinking about, my wife and my family more than I'm thinking about myself. And so, and that's something that at the beginning, the pride, it's just a jerk, just like, what I mean? So I'm gonna say, like, that season I can go back, and it's just being young and naive and idealistic, and almost self-righteous of, like, what I think it should be, like, that sort of thing, that I think stole a lot of what God wanted to do in that season. And I thank God that through seasons of ups and downs, and through relationships of people that God's placed in our lives, that I was able to realize that the key is staying in that selfless place, that God fuels you, that God pours into you in ways that only He can. And in that place, when I'm in that healthy place, you know what I mean? It's nothing like it. It's nothing like it. And so, yeah, it's not about you. It's not about you would be the simple way of saying it.
Wow. Thank you for
That'd
being.
be the simple way of saying it.
Thank you. Thank you for being transparent. All right. Here's the last one. Happiness wisdom. What would you tell your younger self about happiness if you could?
I would say to steward happiness, you have to steward your expectations. I feel like happiness and expectations go hand in hand. To go a little bit deeper into that, are you expecting things from people that they would never be able to fulfill? you're not going to be happy. You're going to be frustrated. You're going to be mad. Are you expecting too much from people that don't deserve the right to have that expectation put on them? Do you have unrealistic expectations of yourself? I think expectation management is a pillar to being able to sustain happiness. And so I think the reason why a lot of times in marriage that, the struggles there is because you have a lot of expectation of your spouse. Rightfully so. I think you should. But getting up underneath those expectations and making sure that they're the right ones, making sure that they're at the level that they should, or are they unspoken expectations? Like all of that, I think has a lot to do with happiness in marriage. But happiness in general of some people get mad and angry and so out of pocket, out of people that they will never ever see again. Have you ever been to a store and someone was just rude or not helpful in the store and people just get so irate and mad at them, right? I don't understand that. I don't know you. I will never see you again. Why would I have an expectation of you to be a good person? I don't know you. Now I expect you to not put me in harm's way. I expect you, that's a level of expectation. But I don't expect everybody generally to be nice. Through relationship, you earn the right for me to put expectation on you. That right there, I think can keep you happy, can keep you full of joy, is when you're able to manage expectations. And sometimes people, you give them the expectation, rightfully so. And sometimes you've been hurt so much over time because of the expectation you had of people. And sometimes it's just, we can go through our lives and have people in relationships. I think about even personally in my life, there's people in my life that I should be able to expect to do X, Y, Z. And I can really get upset thinking about it. I should be able to expect you to do this. But once I realize that they can't and they won't, based on their own, I have to make a decision and say, I don't expect that of you anymore, because that is going to steal my happiness. That's going to steal my joy, and I can't give you that power. Wow. So I'm not going to expect that of you anymore. I'm not. Wow. I'm not going to expect you to do that anymore. So just not to be specific, that's something right now that I can think of in my life that I should be able to expect you to do this. And once I got to the point and said hey, you're going to do what you want to do, I'm going to be happy. I'm going to have a smile on my face. I'm going to have energy. I'm not going to let it take it's expectation management.
That's good. That's look, this isn't a word, but that's gooder than Really, really good. So listen, I appreciate you taking your time. I know that you have a demanding schedule, so I really appreciate you making room for me. And I have one last thing to tell you.
Okay.
To know that success looks so good on you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate
it. Thank you.
Now, I hope that I did not steer you wrong. I hope that you were blessed like I said you would be. And I hope you know now why I think he is an incredible guy. I want you to know that you have all of the promise and potential in your life to excel. And when you put into practice some of the examples that we're learning from all of these achievers, including Chet, you will see a life you love blossom in your own life. You will experience what it means to be blessed, and you definitely will experience what I mean when I say that you can build a life you love without apology. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I pray that you were blessed today. Well, that's it, beautiful. Thank you for tuning in. Don't ever forget that you truly deserve life, love, and all the happiness your heart can hold. Be relentless in building a life you love without apology. I'm Denise Taylor, and you can always find me in our free Facebook community. Life, love, in the pursuit of happiness, easy to find. Now, if you want more information about my success superpowers, as I'm sure you do, download my free Success Superpowers ebook at denisetaylor.live/podcast. And one last thing, always embrace your power and go.